Thank you so much, Sue. Welcome. As she mentioned, I'm Scott Knudson. The hat I'm wearing today is that of the chair of the Potomac Valley Design Awards Committee. I'm joined by our panelists, Mark McInturf of McInturf Architects, Antonio Ribello of Grimm and Parker, Tom Canfield of the City of Alexandria, who really comes to us as a juror. The other three are significant winners, if you will, and Maria Gorodetskaya of Schimberg and Venus. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk a little bit, give you some dry slides about our process, and just go through some of the jury guidelines so that you understand what our jurors are seeing from us. And then each of the panelists will give a presentation on their past experiences and kind of lessons they've learned over the years, and some pointers for how to approach your entries. And then we'll go through a top 5 do's and don'ts for your entry, and then we're going to open up for panel discussion on a few hot button topics, and then we'll go to questions and answers and even broader discussion. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quickly. Share screen. So this year, 2022, our jury, we've already selected our head juror, and it's going to be a principal from SQ Dumez and Ripple, Christian Rodriguez, who's one of their younger principals. They're based in New Orleans. I was just touring their office a couple days ago to make sure that they'd be an acceptable jury. And this is the view from Christian's desk, so it isn't too bad. Our process, unlike what it used to be, say, a decade ago, and unlike what some other chapters do, is we try to identify a head juror from a different part of the country every year, who's from a really renowned firm that does great work and has a really good open-minded attitude about architecture. And then we leave it to them to identify a compatible team of additional jurors from their region. And they do that even though they're all in the same region. Usually once in a while, people pick somebody from around the country. We do seek diversity in thought and in person. We require, the board of Potomac Valley requires that the jury be at least 1/3 non-white male, is how I would phrase it. I ask of them that they also bring a range of, they usually have about 5 total jurors, and that they represent a range of scales in practice and different architectural philosophies and styles, so that there's a little, really more representation of what our chapter does, because we have such a diverse range of the things that you folks are doing. We'll know who those additional jurors are in a few to several months, probably by, well, we'd ask them to tell us by June. The timeline this year is we'll be issuing the call for entries. We don't have a hard date, but I would say in the coming few to several weeks. The submissions will be due July 18th, and Pam and Sue spend a couple weeks organizing all that, and then the judging occurs on a single day in August at the jury's choosing. What they do first, their process, well, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but they individually review the projects at their leisure, and then they meet together to review the ones that rise to the top. And then we'll actually be presenting the awards in October. And just rolling through some of this is from the 2020, this text, but it's pretty similar. The guidelines, every year we issue guidelines to the jury, and we tweak those guidelines each year based on feedback from our membership. And so quite frankly, you can see what we issued in 2020 and provide feedback to us now before we issue them this year. We also tweak our rules every year, our entry rules. But typically we do stick with these really 3 levels of award. Honor, merit, and citation. We've tweaked the definitions sometimes, but the general understanding is that an honor award is the highest award, and it means everything about this project is great, and it all pulls together and every part of it works. And a merit award is, just off of that. Citation typically means you really nailed one aspect of the project, but there may be some other parts or elements of the project that the jury didn't think quite rose to the level of receiving an award. And then out of those, the pool of projects to get honor, merit, and citation, we ask the jury to pick the gold award, best of show, for residential and for non-residential. They actually have the ability to say nothing deserves that award, but generally they've been very good about finding one that does. And then starting last year, we also started with the PV award, which is essentially our project that brings in the design excellence criteria the most. So we'll talk in greater detail about that. And I just wanted to remind folks that we, in addition to awarding work, we also are awarding individuals, and particularly we're recognizing emerging professionals with a practitioner award. And so if you are or know of an emerging professional, and you can read AIA's definition of that, that is particularly meritorious, we ask for you to nominate that individual. When the jury is reviewing the projects, they are reviewing them individually. Hypothetically, they're not ranking the jobs 1 through 20 or anything. And we've seen some juries that have a very high bar for what's awardable, and some have a different, they put the bar where they will. I always ask them to put the bar, to recognize that the projects they're seeing that are submitted are by definition what our chapter considers the best work in the chapter, because that's the work you've decided to submit for an award. And so starting from that perspective, to not, say, oh, this didn't rise to a national standard. And we are very flexible with how the jury weighs. It's a very intuitive process. It's not a series of check boxes and things like that, but that they should consider, and often they do. Like if a project is a low budget project but did really well on that low budget, it's more likely, what I'm trying to say is the same project on a low budget is more likely to win than the exact same result with a high budget. And the jury also has the discretion of how many projects will receive awards. We usually push them to, like I said, award as many as possible, at least 20%, maybe 30%, but some of them give less, but there is no limit on the number of awards. You are asked to identify the category your project fits in. They are not looking at it and saying, okay, we need to give out 5 residential awards and 5 institutional awards and 5 commercial awards. Those are really just to help them categorize it and to help understand the uses of the projects. And the jury is also told to consider these other criteria, the contextual relationships, the use of materials, economy, functionality, accessibility, clarity. And we'll talk later in heated debate about the framework for design excellence. And our chapter takes a little bit more libertarian approach to the AIA National's new framework for design excellence, in that we recognize it, we see the value in it. We think it's great that AIA is taking a stand and pushing for a value set. But there are projects that the 10 or so points in that framework just simply don't apply to. And so we don't ask you to address measures that are irrelevant to your project. And we leave it open-ended how much you want to stress those issues. There are jurors we've heard in feedback that felt like if the project said nothing about sustainability, then they start with question marks, but it's not a criteria. And the second paragraph here, you can see that we basically tell them, first, just look at it qualitatively overall, and then if you're really digging into the project, well, this year we said 5. A couple of years ago, we picked 5 of the criteria, but now we've just gone to all 10. That's when they should start reading that text if relevant to the project. So it's not part of the first cut. It's not that you check all the boxes and all the 10-point factors and you get all the scores, and if you pass, then you're considered for design excellence. You're considered for design excellence, and then these factors can enhance your situation. There's a quick list of the categories. We occasionally mix these up a little bit, but in the most recent thing, I guess, was really to try to better define what is a small project. And that's that it was under 1,000 square feet or under $300,000 budget, or say a piece of furniture or a football or whatever it is you've designed. And we would like to emphasize the unbuilt category. We don't get very many entries in that and would love to see more. And the same with urban design, we don't get very many entries in that category. That said, don't try to gamesmanship what you're doing and say, oh, if only I submitted that in urban design because there's not many entries, I'll probably win. They're going by the design quality, but would really love to see more entries in those areas. And that's where I'll stop for now. And we're going to go and start with Tom, hear a little bit about his experience on juries.
Great, thanks, Scott. And can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, just a little background on me. I've been in DC since the late 70s, started work at Arthur Cotton Moore's office, later Perkins & Will, a bunch of other firms. I joined the city about 15 years ago, and so this role here is really kind of a design critique role because I evaluate submissions for actual development, and we have a lot of input on design here. That said, my experience, as Scott mentioned, is coming to you as a juror the last 6 years or so. I entered a bunch of PA award submissions a long time ago, actually won one of them, and then this was Perkins & Will, and our team submitted a number of other projects over the next 4 years, and amazingly, we couldn't believe we didn't win another award. We submitted them the same way we had submitted the first one, and were puzzled by that. Is it the project? Is it the presentation? I think that's some of what I'm going to touch on here. I started serving as an architecture juror on the NAIOP Awards back in 2016. And then last fall, I also worked on the Montgomery County Design Excellence Awards. So I think for me as a juror, the bottom line is pretty much comes back to what you probably heard in school crits, which is if it's being handled well, did you define your goals clearly? Did you work in a linear fashion to achieve those goals, and did you actually accomplish them? So I think the biggest problem I've seen with submissions is architects who, as a group, generally aren't very good writers, trying to spin a tale about why this project is worthy of an award, but they don't really get into why it is. They have a whole collection of jargon they use, and I think what has stood out for me in the awards that we actually gave was that the presentation was very clear. I think it does make a difference if you include developmental information. So I think seeing study models, hand-drawn sketches, diagrams, even a really quick kind of a flip book through how the project evolved from the first concepts to what the finished project is. Again, not to belabor that, but something that lets a juror understand how this thing came from an idea to what we've seen presented in concrete form. The other thing, I'm amazed every year at how many projects are actually quite good, but the presentation that's submitted for the award doesn't really explain it. Frequently, there are actually missing drawings. They don't have enough plan and section information to really understand the project. So you're getting either renderings, model shots, or in the case of completed buildings, photographs, but it's actually kind of a challenge to figure out what they were doing. And I'm always amazed by that. NAIOP, I will say, some of the awards are submitted by developers or contractors, and often they don't understand how important this is, but we've even had architects submit material that they clearly spent a lot of time on, and they somehow forgot to say what the point was. I think another element is it probably, if you're in a larger firm or medium-sized firm, it's a good idea to get the team who actually designed the project involved in the submission, because there's a lot of history that they have that would help make the explanation better. A little bit of background on the NAIOP awards. We started, the second year I did it, we started using I guess it's a proprietary software program called Judgify. It's a large jury and a lot of categories. And Scott mentioned checkboxes. We don't stick to them, but what we try to do is for the week before we actually get together and meet in person, everybody goes through all the projects and kind of does a very quick ranking on a series of maybe 10 categories for each one. And those are visible to the other jurors. So as you're working, you can kind of see where people are heading. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I will say that we don't actually then do the awards based on that ranking at all. But what it does do is help weed out some of the ones that nobody really thinks rise to the level of a serious consideration, so that we can spend a lot more of our time focusing on the little variations between the good and the great. I think that has helped us in our deliberations a lot. And speaking of deliberations, I think Scott mentioned this too. Jury deliberations can be really kind of free flowing, and I think that's a good thing. You start with some kind of preliminary picks for who's going to get them, but then there are a lot of pro and con arguments, and I think people involved in juries are used to that kind of thinking, and I think it's very positive that that process goes on as long as it does. So those are my first thoughts.
Great. Mark? No, Maria's second. I'm sorry, Maria.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Gorodetska. I'm a principal with Schönberg Levinas. I've been in this area for over 10 years, and before that I was with KPF in New York. So some large scale firm experience and smaller scale firm experience. Most of the projects I'm dealing with now are institutional, so schools, religious buildings, and of course its own share of also residential work. And in this role, I've been fortunate to work on projects from staff architect, project architect, now project manager, and principal role. So kind of the gamut, and thankful also to be able to participate in the submission process for the awards. So to Tom's point, I think it is very helpful to be involved in the project and be involved in the award submission, because there's nuances that you understand that may not come across as clearly as if you are just looking at the images. So we've been fortunate at Schönberg Levinas to win a good share of awards with a Potomac Valley, but also a Maryland and Northern Virginia. A lot of our work is in the city, but we also have some projects in Richmond and in Erie. And I will say it's definitely a process, and you submit your work and you spend a lot of time on the submissions, and it is disappointing not to win. But if I've learned anything over the last few years of being involved, is that it's really worth the time to put it in at the beginning and to not rush through the submissions. And what I wanted to share today is some samples where we've submitted a project when it maybe wasn't ready for the award. And now looking back on it, it's very clear for me why we were not successful. But the subsequent submission was awarded, whether with Potomac Valley or another AA chapter. And so here's an example of a project submission that was not successful. And we had our text, but even though the project was completed at this time, we didn't have any of the photography ready yet. So we were so excited about this project. We wanted to share it out, but it just wasn't there. So we included the plans, we included sketches and some ideas, but all we had really was this one rendering. You know, it's hard to stop yourself, but then you need to and kind of reassess the situation and see how best you can showcase your work. So this is the same project that was successful and actually won, I think, 4 awards last year. It was awarded in Potomac Valley, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And it really came across much stronger once we had the photography and the additional materials to showcase the work. So some photos, sketches, drawings, images that we thought really kind of help understand the work from all directions, looking in at the details as well, and providing some plans for reference. So that's one sample. Similarly, we submitted Hyde Addison. It's a great project in the center of the city. It's been loved by award committees since then. The neighbors love it. OGB and CFA, the city really love this work. It's a showpiece for the DCPS portfolio. But again, similarly to the other project, we kind of jumped the gun when we first submitted it. And we were not ready. We included plans that are kind of dry, if you think about it. And it really didn't showcase the project. We had one photo that I believe one of our principals took because we were so excited to submit the project, but it really just was not there. The updated submission that went in last year really reflects the project in a much stronger way. We had the professional photography to kind of back up the work and to really show it in a great light, looking at the big picture images, looking at the details, exterior and interior imagery, some progress sketches and drawings as well. So I think, you know, what we've learned in this process is that it's really worth it to wait, to spend the time to prepare the materials, to prepare the drawings. And you know, we love our work. We're very excited to share it, but it's about stepping back. For us, it's about stepping back and trying to see it from the review, from the jury's perspective, and to see how we can explain it to them, how they will see our work. Because I think in our minds, it's very simple to say, oh, it's a great project. It has these great features, and obviously they will understand. But it's about kind of going back and going through the steps and really trying to highlight its best features and to show the project from different scales and different viewpoints. And we have a pretty strong track record with AA awards over the last 10 years. But it's every year we have to stop ourselves to think and to plan and to really just take it one step at a time. I know Scott mentioned the framework for excellence and now the new requirements for the submissions. And another point I wanted to make is that awards, we've learned that we cannot, you know, decide from one day to the next to submit an award and have something ready 3 days later. We really have to plan for it, put those due dates on our calendar, figure out which projects we're going to submit weeks and months later, and to start preparing the materials. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. All right, now it's Mark's turn.
Okay. You guys can all see and hear me, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I'll just put that up. Actually, let me go back. Hang on 1 second. Yeah. I wanted to talk for a minute about doing it from about the jury's point of view, having done a number of juries for this kind of thing. Having been with a number of different kinds of jurors, there are those who have a very systematic approach they've got sort of a point system, or there's dots that are placed or whatever it is. And then there's me. And basically I look to fall in love. And I want there to be some images that will make that happen. I do want the story told. I will read the text. But if I don't fall in love with the first couple of pictures, I'm not going to get there. That's just kind of the way I work, which is why one of the problems I have with the framework, but we'll deal with that later. So now I'm just going to show one project, and it's one that was unsuccessful several times. And then the framework came along, and we actually won an award, trying to cater to that, even though I'm against it. But so I'm going to show this project and what we did to modify the situation. So it's a house on the Chesapeake Bay, on the footprint of a previous house. Otherwise, we couldn't have placed it on this site. So there was a lot of effort to do that. And the clients did want a very sustainable house. So, we're totally in favor of sustainability. It's the bean counting side that drives me crazy. So this is a well-ventilated house. It's got, they harvest all their rainwater for irrigation. It's got solar, and it's got geothermal, and all kinds of the right thing. So anyway, this is that. So in the second set of submissions, we started using these diagrams down here, which I do on my iPad.
Or they're not showing up yet.
Hey, Mark, yeah,
What?
you're not sharing.
I'm not? Oh,
No.
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not good at sharing. All right.
Sorry, we asked you to.
Somebody needed to say that. All right, so here we go. Usually I have one of my young people sitting next to me. Participants can now see my screen.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Got
So I'm
it.
going to go back to this page here. This is, I've already said what I need to say about this. So in this new round of effort to sort of, I guess, hype the ways we responded to sustainability, which we would have done anyway, without needing to hype it. These are diagrams that deal with how the house opens up and so forth. It's an interesting house in one particular way, I think, which is that, and you'll see it in a minute, that you can open all the windows and all the screens, and they make various layers of porches and stuff. So, and that's what these diagrams are dealing with here. It's a room with a porch, it's a room with a screen porch, it's all screen porch, or it's all open porch. So I like that. And then just, the usual kind of photographs. This is my furniture. We have a problem sometimes that our clients' furniture is not what we want it to be, and we'll actually truck in all this stuff. Everything you see is mine. And that's part of the effort. I mean, the effort of doing these things and the effort of photography is immense, and the cost is immense. So there's no point in photographing, something that is poorly furnished. Better to furnish, to just clear it out and photograph it empty. Even the pictures on the walls are mine. So this is how the back of the house opens up, and you can see the porch beyond also opens up, and these different layers can be opened in different ways. And then diagrams here. But all this is stuff, the overhangs, the ventilation and geothermal. This is all stuff we did anyway. I mean, it's just, it makes sense. We try and hit the photography at different scales, from detail all the way to a fairly global view. So this lower right picture is, well, we also make models of everything. So we frequently photograph the model you see on the left. But on the right is a drone shot. We bought a drone because we were excited about them, and took some pictures, and then we crashed it. And then we got another one, and we took some more pictures. We crashed that one. So right now we don't have a drone. You also can't fly a drone within 15 miles of the Capitol building or something like that. But I like the way it gives the landform surrounding this house. The plans are very straightforward. trying to get various viewpoints down and out, seeing the water over the deck above. And then I think, well, here you see a kind on the left, the way that the house closed up, and above it, the house opened up, and the kind of transformation that can happen there. And then the one on the right is looking from the water right through it. Detail is always important to us and craft. And so we like to, at some point, for the photographs to zero in on something a lot closer. So there's not just the sense of the same scale and room dimensions as you go through everything. I think usually this is probably the last slide, because we try and end with a sexy last slide. We try and open with a sexy slide and end with a sexy slide. And if all the other ones are a little less sexy, that's okay. Yeah, I think that's the last slide. So I think, revamping, I think Maria was really spot on saying, if it didn't do well, first of all, the jury's different every year. So don't assume if it didn't win. Somebody once told me that if Hugh Jacobson didn't win one year, he wouldn't enter it again. And I wanted to call him and say, why don't you enter again? Then I thought, well, then he'll win and we won't win. So anyway, we re-enter until the project is no longer eligible. And I have challenged recently the eligibility date restriction. I don't think it makes any difference. If it's good design and it's 15 years old, why can't it win an award? We should also have a 25-year award in the chapter, by the way, and a gold medal, just saying. So that's kind of my experience most recently with trying to sort of update to the framework and our general strategy toward going after these things. We've won a lot of awards, but we've entered a whole lot of awards. So it's not like, I would say, we might get 1 in 5 or something like that, or it could be worse. I don't know. Anyway, that's what we do.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Antonio?
Hello.
Hey, Mark, you want to stop sharing?
Yes, I want to stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Antonio Ribello. I am a partner with Greenman Parker Architects and the director of design. I've been working on conceptual design and all forms of design all my life, starting my career with folks like Frank Schlesinger and Shalom Baranas, and now for the past many years here. What has been a constant in my life has been these awards. It's kind of it's a fun thing, but it's a pain thing at the same time, because it's a recurring event every year. And so I have the pleasure to help shepherd this process here. One thing that I find it effective, first of all, I think it's important to get design awards because they validate a lot of our clients' visions and dreams for their projects, and does make you a little bit more desirable in one way or another to be working with an award-winning architect. I think so. That's why we keep going back and applying to all kinds of awards. We do our the DC, Maryland, Potomac Valley, Chesapeake, you name it, and religiously every year. We submit the same project for many different awards, and sometimes we have to modify the submission depending on the requirements of the submissions. But we use a lot of the same imagery. As Maria said very well earlier, it pays to be complete. And as she said also, we also get excited and submit prematurely many times. And we find out that that doesn't pay off. we don't get the awards. But we go back the following year and we analyze why probably we didn't win, and follow through. I can share some of my images here, some of the recent submissions, kind of. Let me see here, share, and I'm gonna go here. So here's a project that we submitted in 2017 that we had professional imagery. The project looked really interesting, had a very interesting narrative, but we somehow weren't able to explain it correctly in the submission, so we didn't win anything. The following year, we submitted and we changed our text slightly, and we actually paid a little bit more attention to what we were talking about this project, which was its connectivity to the neighborhood, a sense of empowerment to a community that was hurting financially, and having a building that they can call a community, a center of sorts, being in this library. And we explained how the building connects both on the exterior, in the interior, some features and details of this project that connects to the history of the site. And we use most the same photography, but just added a little bit and polished what we were talking about. And we ended up winning a series of awards, including a national award with this project. So one year we won nothing, and the next year we win a few awards. So that was something interesting. Similar story for this project here, where we got excited when the project was completed and we photographed it, but the part of the building was not even finished. This is a co-located library and senior center in Leonardtown. And this wing of the building in this model is the senior center, and this is the library. As you can see here in this plan. Well, we had photography for the library, but none for the senior center. And so we did what we could. We went around, we photographed it, we showed plans, and showed, of course, imagery of the library. And we didn't win anything. So the following year, we went back and we just photographed the senior center, and we included it in the submission. And most of the same pictures, but now we add new imagery of the senior center. And I don't know if that made a difference or not, but the result was that we actually got an award for this project. And then there's projects like this, where I can't say for sure. We did hear the multiple narratives by the juries on the delivery of the awards. This is one of the highest awarded projects we've ever done, and it's a little dinky tiny interior intervention that we did in a shopping center, and we made a library. And I think that may have been part of the fact that the transformational nature of the design, from a space like this, a little tenant fit out, to a simple library for community use. And of course, with provocative imagery, with some sketches, some details. This project and this submission was repeated without changing, and we kept winning awards until the date we couldn't submit it anymore, which was interesting. This one is this one we were fortunate to receive an award. Also, it's a fairly complicated project. To explain this project in a succinct manner takes a little bit of effort, and what was said earlier is absolutely true. We actually gathered a team that worked on the project, and we almost interview each member. I worked on the conceptual design, but there was all kinds of people that worked on this project, and hearing different perspectives and adding some of the vignettes of the early sketches with photography, explaining how the building works from an exterior point of view, seems to have been a successful approach for this. And we also dividing and conquering. I mean, even adding some of the sketches that we did on in explaining how this gym works relative to the street with the parking garage and a walking track on top of the gymnasium and so forth. And the perspective of the playground, both from the inside the building as well from the outside. And some diagrams explaining what happens in connecting, how we connect an underground garage upstairs, and how important that is, and how the circulation functions with all the elements stacking from all the floors. So this was a successful submission. On the other hand, this one has not been successful, and we don't know why yet. So we've been we're resubmitting this year, but we find this an interesting building. This is affordable housing, which is a tough market to be in. Very, as most of you know that work in this field know, it's tough to make something out of very little. And I think the story of this one is precisely that. And the kind of ownership that you give to the future residents of these buildings. So how can architecture convey that sentiment? It's kind of difficult. Maybe the submission was rushed. Maybe we need new photography. But just sharing with you something that hasn't worked yet. So what do I? Oh, this is the final one. I picked to show you this. This is an example of a building that I personally consider the exterior elevations nothing to be awarded for, but the interiors to be phenomenal. And so we actually concentrated on that. So we concentrated on the process, we concentrated on the plans and the relationships, and on the interiors of the building. And this project has been awarded several times also. And it's interesting because it was a very conscious decision to focus on the interiors of this thing instead of trying to be so, showing the entire building, which I don't think I don't think Mark McInturf would fall in love, just to let you know. So that's pretty much what I had to share. I have some other ideas about the 10 top things that I consider important to do when preparing for a submission, as well the things not to do. But I think Scott is going to talk about that in the next segment, so I'm going to hold off on that.
And you can always augment. That'd be great. A couple of little things that I forgot to get into were sort of the eligibility for submitting, if you want to submit to our awards. There's the key test is whether the project was designed by a member of Potomac Valley or was built in our chapter's region. So either you're from here or the project is here, and either one counts. So you could have done a project in Saudi Arabia, or a Saudi Arabian could have done a project here. Both can be awarded. But we will not be giving any awards to SOM for a project they did in LA. And the jury is they judge the projects blind. I hate it when they say that. That's the phrase we use. I don't know why. They're looking at it. They're not blind. They are not aware of who you are. And so your submissions have to be discreet. You can't include your logo on the page. You also can't sort of slip in your name in the text or anything like that that might divulge who the entrant is. There are some firms that submit projects that are formatted in a way that you might guess that these two projects are by the same firm. You're allowed to do that, and their guess may be correct. It doesn't really matter. We don't expect the jury to be ignorant of the world, and if they happen to have seen your project, well, then they may bring that additional knowledge to their judging, but don't plan on them being aware of your project and knowing how good it was to make up for your bad photography. But again, they're generally not from here. And so they, chances of them seeing your local work are somewhat lower unless it's been published nationally or something.
Hey, Scott, can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I actually had a client come to me and say, we would really love to host AIA Potomac Valley to come in to our building, and hopefully we can get an award. Like, it doesn't really work that way.
Those are
Like,
two good
what do you
hopes.
And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, exactly what you said. It's like, no, we can't give awards to ourselves. It's enough. And he was
If
very
only, yes.
disappointed, but he did understand that. So,
Well,
anyway.
but we are always looking for a place to hold our awards events. So we want to
course.
hear about those clients. Those would be great.
Uh,
Especially the ones that, especially ones that don't want to charge us too much and will allow us to serve alcohol.
we can always arrange that, but I can't guarantee the award portion. That's the,
No, can't guarantee it. And then lastly, the submission process is digital online. We've set up a portal that you upload your PDFs to, and it's all explained in the rules when you get those. But typically, there's a submission PDF, and then there's a document that includes your contact info, which is not shared with the jury. And then there's a short PDF that will be shown at the awards ceremony should you win. We don't go through every single slide with all the text. But I do appreciate all you guys. And I think you guys, the viewers, were able to see, it was great to see that range of submissions, because one thing I noticed is there's a big range in the choice of composition on a page, from single shot, full page, to many shots with either almost no words or a fair number of words. So it's a big blend in kind of that text photo balance. I do want to go now to this top 5 real quickly. So the top 5 avoids. Do not do this. 5, don't use renderings if it's built. Now, it doesn't mean diagrams. Diagrams are great. But if you built the project, we'd like to see the project, not the rendering of the project. 4, don't add imagery that's off message. Some people feel that they need to show everything. And we have literally heard jurors say, oh, that project was going to win until we saw the photograph of the office, and it's out.
Mhm.
3, don't alter the photos. You're allowed to use what I would call adjustment filters. You can change the you can change the contrast, the exposure, those kinds of things. I used to work for a firm that had a non-architect as a COO, and we submitted for an award project. And after I saw the submission, I said, wait a minute, that's not, the door is the wrong color. The front door is not the color it was built. It says, oh yeah, I saw the photo, the color that you guys used is terrible, and it really should have been this color. And so I changed the photo. And maybe he was right, but it's wrong. Don't do that. And don't give up. You've heard a lot of these. I think it's great to hear that Mark McIntyre wins so many projects, feels like he doesn't win, but a minority of what he submits. So keep trying. I think the fine line that we'll maybe talk about as a team here is how to know when you should give up. Are you not winning because this project's not up to the standards, or are you not winning because you're not telling the story right? And that's a little bit of a tricky question. And then don't overwrite. This should be a storybook, not a novel. It's a graphic novel. Top 5 do's. Well, I meant to animate these 2, but that's all right. Include your diagrams. Talk about your process. floor plans, sketches. I love the one Antonio had of the photo with the sketch of the same photo.
Mhm.
It's okay if those diagrams are made retroactively. They don't really, if you made a diagram, great. If you are submitting and realize there's a missing diagram like Mark did with the house, go ahead and create it.
Mhm.
And cover this at all scales, zoom in, zoom out, talk about the city, talk about the neighborhood, the building, the detail, the doorknob. And thirdly is just follow instructions. You've all heard about how poor Boo got kicked out of the India competition for using the wrong color ink. And I think he damn well should have been kicked out for that, and that was a rule. So the rules are simple, but you do have to follow them. Always tell a good story, and absolutely use professional photography. Which brings me to my first question for the panel, which is, gosh, professional photography is kind of expensive. How much time, effort, and money do you commit to a submission? What should somebody who hasn't done this often plan on?
I can respond to that.
Yep.
I think it just depends really on the project and how much it's published or not. We've had projects in the office that we decide does not warrant professional photography. We're not going to feature it on our website. We're not going to submit it anywhere. So then we may just take a few photos for ourselves, but that's kind of the end of it. Then we have projects that we know are showpieces that will get a lot of attention, a lot of publicity for the client and for us. It will be featured heavily on our website. So then for us, the award submission is kind of the cherry on the top. So the text for us has now been the bigger time commitment in some way that we didn't plan for previously, responding to the framework. But the photos we typically take in any case, because we want that for our portfolio. And then it's a matter of spending, a number of days to clean up the drawings, to add any sketches that we think would help, kind of comb through our archives. But it's really worth it to spend that time. I feel like just including drawings from the CD set doesn't really cut it. To spend a couple of days, a week, clean up the materials, and then you can use the same submission for multiple awards. And you can use it for publication materials as well.
Thanks for mentioning multiple awards. That advantage of our online portal, for those of you who have not submitted in our chapter yet, is it's seamless with Maryland. So if you prepare your package for one or the other, you just check a box and now submit it to the other. Check a box and write a check.
Write a check.
The two checks. Mark, what are your thoughts on kind of investment in getting an award?
I try not to pay attention to how much it costs, because it would be depressing. It's, you do a project you like and you photograph it and you try and get it out there, which typically has been awards and magazines. Magazines are dying right now. The Washington Post hasn't covered architecture in years, so that's a dwindling market. And it's very expensive to photograph a building, even if you can get the photography shared with the general contractor or the interior designer or whoever. So, frankly, and I've said this publicly, with the framework, we're going to photograph fewer projects.
Mr. Ravello?
It's interesting. I agree. It is extremely expensive to get it photographed. And it's interesting because we've had various experiences with professional photography throughout the years. One aspect of professional photography is that some of these professionals are really booked up, and they sometimes are going to take pictures with weather conditions and situations that I personally would not want the building to be photographed. And so I sometimes end up asking for renewed photography, and we end up doubling the cost of photography, which really, really makes people unhappy around me. But that's one thing that that happens. And then this magical thing happened. I like to go scout the projects and take pictures with my cell phone and or with my SLR camera and kind of frame things. I also look at our 3D renderings that we did for the project, which we have been showing it for months and sometimes years to clients. And I like to go and see if I can get the same image with a camera. And the magical thing that happens is I did find someone in my office that has a hobby as a photographer. And I invited him to come with me. And lo and behold, the pictures have been award-winning coming out of this. And obviously we remunerate that person for that effort. And we found that having an architect actually photograph the building has been amazing, and someone that has the right equipment and doesn't, it waits for the right time, the right light, the right everything to take a picture. That has been really, really successful for us. So we do a combination, and we also, when we photograph the buildings, we not only photograph it for awards, believe it or not, we also photograph it for to have, like Maria said, like in the portfolio, so that we can go and select an image of a nice classroom or a great lobby or whatnot. That is our work that we can put in our proposals or presentations or things that we do or articles that we may write. So it's not all for awards, and that's how we kind of justify the exorbitant cost that it takes. So.
Well, you guys are scaring me with all this exorbitant cost. What would you say? How exorbitant is that?
I was going to ask the same question. Yeah.
Say thousands of dollars, but I think it's different when you have like a nationally renowned firm versus a small business with one location. And, you know, I think if you have that support and the infrastructure, it's different than making these decisions where, you know, $200, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think thousands of dollars is doable, right? You know, tens of thousands may not be.
It depends. It really depends, and we sometimes have to we have packages that we you know, either 10 photographs or 20 photographs or 30 photographs, and the prices they're not exponential, but they are, you know, you do get a little break if you have more images, but we often partner up with the contractors for sharing in the cost, and sometimes it exceeds $10,000. So.
But I think it's not just the cost of the photography, because, for example, we have to have somebody sit down and write the text. I know it said it's not mandatory. I saw that in the chat, but you know, if you want to write the text or first another submission, there's some of that. But also just the time to clean up the drawings, to gather, to scan, to organize the submissions, maybe, you know, draw some elevations that are illustrative and helpful. Maybe, you know, your building is in a tight urban location and it's hard to photograph, so you might want to include a drawing that clarifies an aspect here or there. I mean, I would say it might take a week to put together a proper submission. And if you have a small business and you need to allocate those resources, it's a commitment. Now, at the end of the day, you might say, yes, it's really worth it. It's very important for us. But I think we should acknowledge it.
One thing I've thought interesting on photography, you know, I know a lot of firms always work with the same photographer. I don't. I work with different photographers, and I found there's a big range, obviously, not only in price, but in character of what you get. And you really have to think about who's the right photographer for this particular project. You know, we did one fairly large job that the contractor organized the photography and asked us if we wanted to go in with them. And we said, well, sure, why not, instead of me doing it. And their photographer was quite a bit cheaper than mine. but they had stepped up to this photographer because they wanted a better photographer than they usually use. So there's kind of architectural photographers are the most expensive. Contractors photographers are cheaper. And somehow realtors get dirt cheap photographers, and the photos aren't as good, but they honestly aren't bad. And it's just there's a huge 5-10-fold range in the costs of those, I've found.
Yeah. We have a photo that we bought the rights to that was taken by a photographer at Strathmore that we did at the facility a few years ago. And it caught the orchestra playing in such a beautiful angle with the lights in the background. And we've seen it with our eyes, the building like that, but we've never seen it in the print. And when we saw that picture on the website on Strathmore, we're like, we gotta own this picture. and so we went back and tracked it, and we bought the rights to use it because it's a beautiful picture, and it had nothing to do with us. It was all client. That was an interesting thing as well.
I want to float that Mark's idea about the eligibility date out there. As I mentioned, we are tweaking our rules all the time, and I'd be all game for striking that rule, but I wonder if there's anybody either on the panel or in the audience that's strong proponent of or for or against deleting that. Right now, the project has to have been completed within 5 years, so since 2017. And if it's older than that, we don't want to see it. And as Mark says, why? What does everybody think? Would anybody submit? Does anybody have a project older than 5 years that they finally want to submit for awards, or they think will finally win?
I think it might be one that you've tried for years to submit and just hasn't hit that sweet spot. Because we've also submitted projects where we didn't change anything about our submission and we ended up winning a subsequent year. So I guess you always hold out that hope.
Right.
We'll talk further about that since nobody seems to care one way or the other.
Hey,
And-
Scott, can I say something?
Of course.
I believe that 5-year rule is dictated by AIA, and the components follow what the awards criteria are from AIA. Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the case.
Go back
That's the reason for the 5-year rule.
When you say dictated, meaning we're just following their precedent. It's not like they're telling us we have to have that rule.
You know, I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'll check into it.
Okay.
I'll say something about that. It's probably 20 years ago. The Maryland AI Awards program had died for 5 or 6 years or longer, and a couple of us decided that it should come back, and we sat down and we wrote the rules, which still exist. And I called the National AIA and I said, "So what do you got? What is the common denominator, or what rules?" And they said, "We don't have anything." Now that maybe they do now. But at that time there was no imposition from above, if you call that above, to local chapters.
It's been in place for so long. I started with AIA in 2003, and the 5-year rule was then. So I don't know. Maybe it has changed, but I will definitely check into that. If there's a consensus that they want to, extend it, and whether we're bound to that or not.
And Mark, your other.
No, I was just going to say, architectural cliches being what they are, it would be interesting to get a 20-year-old project, because it could either be ahead of its time or timeless or something that really looks dated. We do see a lot of the same motifs over and over, and only for a period of 3 to 4 or 5 years. So there may be some kind of a linkage. I don't see any reason you couldn't submit a much older project then.
Great.
And Scott, I just wanted to mention, we do have some chat comments that are echoing an interest in submitting projects that are older than 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a likely outcome then. Easy easy edit to hit the delete button on the text. And yes, Scott, you mentioned the Legacy Award, which Scott Bowen, and I gather that's similar to what Mark's saying about the 25-year award. Well, only concern I would have on that is I'd want to make sure we had a reasonable pool to be judging from. And I don't know if we would simply want to go back and look at 25+ year old winners and have the jury look at that pool, or if we would wait firms to submit for a 25-year award, or what the logistics would be. Anybody got experience with that at the national level or other?
I don't, but I know it's fairly common in other chapters. I'm not really, I'm pushing this, I just think that there are other things we could be looking at too, like a gold medal, a design gold medal like California has, like New York has, like parts of Virginia. We have every other kind of medal.
Not a gold medal for the gold medal project this year, but rather,
A
Mark,
person.
here's your gold medal.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be me.
I know, but
But it's
so you're the
like
easy
we
one to
chip around all the edges, and like, well, right in the middle of it is a designer. So anyway, I'm happy to nominate people.
Yes.
I feel like we've talked a lot about the hardships and the negative sides, but I think we should talk about the positive too.
Please do.
Because it is really exciting to be recognized by your peers, and it's something we talk about with our clients as well. And even, especially for a project that is award-winning across many chapters, then in some way, it really is a winner. So I do want to encourage people to submit. And I don't know if there's any way to give like a discounted rate if you're submitting a certain number of entries. Because you may have 3 or 4 projects, and it is daunting when you think about the cost of it.
One thing that we try to do here is to identify folks that are in between projects, or if we have a project that goes on hold for a permit or whatnot, or review, maybe that person can jump on awards, which is under marketing efforts, and help out clean a plan, or create a section, or make an elevation, or if that person is inclined to write well, have the person write a nice compelling narrative. And when I say a person, it can be more than one. Last year was a challenging year for us in many ways, and we had folks, and we made a clear decision not to let anyone go in the company. And so what we did was we just went on to marketing mode, and we had a lot of that stuff done, which was kind of cool. So things that you normally don't get to do, all of a sudden we have these beautiful renderings, drawings, elevations, nice write-ups and all that. So I don't know, it's a different way of approaching that.
Yeah, I think for us also, another reason that entering awards programs has been good for us. We're a very small firm. We work out of the house next to my house. It's, it feels like it could be a little cottage industry. And yet, if you win enough awards, other architects see that and they recommend you for other projects. We've actually worked for 10 architects already, working on their residential, their house, because they're with the World Bank or a big firm, or they're retired or something like that. But also, a lot of architects have recommended us to be on a list for this, that, or the other. So I think it's, networking among architects may sound silly, but it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our industry, we also work for architects. A lot of our clients are architects that are in these with government entities that we do buildings for. And so it is extremely important for us to have this kind of recognition of our work. It's for us and for our clients, because they love that their projects are award-winning projects. So,
And And we do try to include the clients on the award ceremony because I think that it's more exciting for them.
Yeah.
And it means something to them, and then they will support the projects or other projects that you may do with a similar client in the future.
Right.
Well,
Excellent.
I'd like to encourage people to either post a question in the chat or just turn on your speaker and ask a question but while we're waiting for questions to filter in, why don't we open those floodgates to talk more about that framework? I know, Mark, you have a policy position on it, actually, or a white paper, whatever you want to call it.
I wrote a letter. It was signed by 6 fellows, significant, Bob Gurney, David Jameson, Janet Bloomberg of Cube, and we said this doesn't work, particularly for single family residents, that you can't apply this one size fits all thing to a residence. There's no way that my single family house in Bethesda can improve pedestrian access or social equity or any number of other things. So it needs to be tailored if it's going to happen at all. And I'm generally not in favor of any kind of bean counting. I think juries have always been, pretty sensitive to kind of all these issues. And people have had faith in the juries, and I don't know why we're suddenly giving them this little straitjacket. So I just find it tedious, and I'm not pulling any punches. Sorry.
Scott Bowen, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have 2. You answered one of mine. I had 3. So I guess 2 things are, and Mark, I know you mentioned it, when you take pictures of spaces where you bring in outside furniture, I know some other bigger photographers do that as well. Are you typically doing that before the owners occupied it, or you're moving their furniture out, and how do they handle you saying your furniture is not, photo worthy?
Your couch is stupid. Yes.
Both, Scott, but we really both. It's a very delicate thing, and I'm not a pushy person, and so it's very hard for me to say to somebody, look, this kind of doesn't work here. In many cases, they haven't furnished it yet, or they intend to, or whatever, and I just want to get it photographed.
Mhm.
But if you look at my website, you'll see the same chairs fairly often. My teacher, Charles Moore, did that. If you look at all his early houses, everything in the house was his. So, you do what you have to do.
There was a period in architectural record when the same telescope showed up in all of the houses of the year
Yeah,
photos
I have one of those.
for years.
And I guess a follow-up.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, you first.
I guess a follow-up question is, and we get our jobs photographed. I work for Centerbrook, so I know Charles Moore. And when I learned from Centerbrook is take a picture of everything, because you never know when you get a chance to get back to it. So we've done that in our own firm, haven't really submitted for a lot of awards, but we have this debate of should we have people in our pictures or not? And I've looked at lots of award submissions. Sometimes they have people, sometimes they don't. Do you think that influences the submission at all, and whether you should have them or not?
My personal view is, I think it really depends on your product. I don't think they ever hurt, but I think if you are telling a story that is very people oriented, then you should have people. If it's a house, obviously it's all our buildings are used by people, but some we're really trying to talk about social interaction more than in others. And I think to have a project where your text says that and there's nobody in the photo is a little odd.
Well, I'll add to that is that for DCPS work, we're not allowed to photograph any students or any members of the school community. So we're having to strategically place like members of our team, but it's not the same as having a gym and full of kids, or a library where you see the students, going about their business in the space that you've designed. So I completely agree with you that I think it's so important to have people, but sometimes you're just not able.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. We have usually a day where we take, because we are 70 people, we take our own children to our schools, and we photograph them, and they pretend to be. And it's interesting when I look at at our calendars from previous years, see our own kids, my kid, in these images, because we value seeing people in the pictures. It gives a sense of scale and proportion and all that. But I agree, not all projects meet people. I read one time something on Ansel Adams, the famous American photographer that took pictures of nature. And someone asked him, why you don't ever have people in your pictures? And he said, because if I put even one single person, they will not see the Grand Canyon. They'll focus on that person. So I don't know. So, but
Earlier, I was going to add a comment to what Mark said. I agree very strongly that some of the new rules of judgment don't apply. And I think not only to single family homes, I think there are plenty of building types that don't further equity or inclusion or transit connectivity or environmental justice or anything else. They're buildings that serve a purpose. They can be sometimes buildings on campuses, all kinds of other functions. I think, those are nice add-ons when they're relevant, but I don't think they should be universal standards because so many things don't fit.
May I speak on the subject of residential? I've been thinking about how to couch my remarks, having helped start the capital area CRAN, Custom Residential Architects Network, in 2013, which is tri-chapter around DC. But I'm concerned for the purpose of this discussion whether those architects who are starting out and doing mostly residential, probably if not exclusively residential, are discouraged by this discussion because the panelists, our distinguished panelists, are all well-established architects. Mark, you've been winning awards for a lot of years, and you can get down to the nitty-gritty of the rules and stuff here, but I want to figure out how to salvage for those who are listening the encouragement to enter. Just the discussion about photography alone can be quite discouraging. This is something of a question too for those of you who've been panelists. Do you see entries from time to time from fledgling architects or, not maybe 5 years out or whatever, who are clearly talented and great? The work is great. The drawings are great. The photography is maybe their own photography. Can you throw a bone at those who would like to be encouraged to enter? And they obviously would benefit from winning awards in terms of building a practice. And so what can you say to that?
I would, Helen, I like the question a lot because one of the reasons that I have an issue with the framework is it may sound selfish of me to be arguing about this because I do a lot of residential work, but no, it's actually that young architects coming up always make their reputation on houses. And if it's hard to get awards for houses, the way it was last year in the DC chapter, let's say, when they gave none, you've shut out that generation. And the second point I'll make is a juror on a program I saw many years ago described what he called the poverty award, which is that it's the award he said it's the award that does the most with the least. So you've got some small, tight budget, difficult, but beautifully designed project. And yes, the presentation is imperfect. Any good juror can see through that. And certainly I've been on juries where I've pounded that home and said, yes, it's not perfect photography. Ironically, if you look at most European photography of architecture, let's take an example of Alvaro Siza, arguably one of the best architects in the world in Portugal. His photography wouldn't win any awards here. The furniture is just sort of laid all about. It's usually muddy outside. The sun is never shining. It's just like, go take a picture. It's a great building, figure it out. I think the emphasis on photography is a little unfortunate, but we're not going to get over it. It's not going to change. But I do think that all of this is a way for younger architects to establish themselves, which is, as you say, what I did a long time ago. You didn't have to say it was a long time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's how we differentiate ourselves and start to get known.
But I'll go back to what I said about presentations in general. However simple the project is, if the idea is amazing and that idea is conveyed well, and that can be through drawings and sketches as well as pictures, photos, absolutely, it's worth doing.
I think that you have to compensate in other areas of your submission. And we see this, you know, in many ways, like when we submit, for example, a proposal for a project and another firm we know who's up for the same project, they have, you know, years more experience with the same project type. And now we have to convince the client that we can do it and that we are the best team, even though we don't have that experience. So we have to push ourselves and be better in other ways. So maybe that's the approach, is that unfortunately, maybe then your drawings have to be more outstanding, the sketches more informative, and, you know, other parts of the submission are, are enhancing the overall package. But it is, at the end of the day, a commitment.
I appreciate that comment. So the message is, don't give up, y'all. Any of you who are listening feel discouraged. But I also think there are photographers out there who are starting out and who would love to, you know, make their chops doing architectural photography. There are a lot of gifted photographers, and the established ones will cost a lot more than the ones who are maybe very talented but starting out.
I would even add that although my number one do is use professional photography, I think the emphasis there is, like Antonio said, one of his staff is not a professional photographer, but effectively at that caliber. And I always thought of myself as a good photographer, but I will say, I take a photo of my building, professional takes the same photo, it somehow is better. But you know, some of that's just, as Mark said, patience, or Antonio said, and waiting for the light. And so if you're trying to self-photograph, just give yourself a high bar and be a more photographer than I am, and, you know, straighten up the rug, and then, you know, turn the doorknob so it's a level, and just those little finesses that the photographers do really makes a difference. You know,
Get rid of your furniture and get it staged.
Actually, believe it or not, we even stage public buildings. We go into a public building and we're like, that trash can can't be here. That sofa needs to go that way, or you know, I mean, it does take effort. And on the comment of the emerging architect professional, unless there is a category, which I think I read on the chat, that specifically is created for that, I don't think no jury is able to determine if this is a young firm starting up or a well-established Mark McIntyre architect. They're all competing for the same thing, and you're not judging based on that. So it's competitive. I don't know what the solution is on that. And we also, I had the honor of being in a jury once, where was for a chapter in Alabama or something like that, and they invited me to be part of this jury, and we met at Howard University. This was for DC, and we looked at these projects, and I tell you, they were 90% residential submissions, and they were not at the caliber that we see here. And you had a bunch of architects looking at these submissions that we looked at each other and we're like, wow, but because we are very used to seeing amazing architecture around us in our region, our peers produce an amazing portfolio of work every year. And so I cannot imagine a small firm from Alabama or looking at our work when they have to jury. It's tough. So I think in our case, what we decided was not to be stingy with the awards and actually give a lot of awards, and try to understand. There was one of them that was really beautiful, but we couldn't figure out what was it. There was no plans that went with the submission or anything. and we really wanted to give an award, and we made it happen. So anyway, that's, I'm sure Tom has been there many times, right?
Yeah,
Seen
that
kind of
sounded,
stuff.
that rang a lot of bells. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And I wanted to make one comment to Helen's questions, which is that at least at AIA Potomac Valley, we do have a history of having some very small firms with architects reasonably early in their career winning awards. And so for anybody who might fit that description, who is on this webinar, you can always go to our website. You can search previous years. You can find those award projects, and you can take a look at them and see how they were able to do it. So it is, it's, you know, it's a challenging assignment, but it most definitely is doable. And we certainly have a history of having had juries that have awarded those projects.
And in the small projects category, we overtly say in our rules, professional photography is not required. It's obviously not ever required because we don't know. But what we're really trying to do is tell the jury, don't expect professional photography in that small category.
Mhm.
So 1 minute left. Who's got another question, or who's got a closing thought? Because I don't. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time, and just follow up with emails. Email Sue or Bam directly, or you can reach me. My email is Scott@Knu Design, KNU.design, if you have a question about the process. So I'm sure any of these other panelists would be happy to chat with you on the phone or email too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
thank you very much. Have a good
Thanks a
day.
lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.